All right, so welcome to the USL show, brought to you by Roughneck Scarves, your home for national team, USL, MLS, custom scarves, things like that. Check those guys out, roughneckscarves.com. Also brought to you by the Beautiful Game Network of podcasts, bgn.fm on the internet, the BGN.FM on Twitter. It's your host, Evan Vlala, as always, joining you guys. This is a little different. I don't have a huge spiel. I will say we're tentatively going to call this the You Play, We Don't series, which is where we talk to players in the USL about, their career in general, things like that. And our guinea pig is, 2016 Defender Team of the Year, former Richmond kicker, former Bethlehem Steel FC member, current Pittsburgh Riverhound, 100 appearances,
Yes, sir.
4-year college career. He's done just about everything. Hugh Roberts, how's it going, man?
Great. I'm awesome to be here on the show. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for, it was always weird to ask someone to be the first, and I'm glad, you accepted, because that would have been awkward. Obviously, two-sport guy, growing up and things like that, when did you kind of make that transition into soccer? Like, when did you realize kind of that was what you were leaning towards more? And obviously, it worked out for you because you are where you are, but
Right.
Was there any kind of uncertainty with picking soccer over basketball, anything like that?
Yeah, kind of. I didn't make a decision until my senior year of high school, so for the first 17 years of my life, I was really juggling between both sports. My mom being from New York, having a basketball background, my dad being Jamaican, and played at NC State University, so he had a big soccer background. So it was kind of split between those two growing up. I had one in one ear, one in the other ear. But I was having some success with both, so I stuck with that literally until my senior year of high school, and I kind of didn't like my high school basketball coach would kind of sway my decision to focus on soccer. And just being 6'4" in soccer is different than being 6'4" in basketball a little bit. So
Right.
I kind of just took my chances and went with this route.
And then you get to GMU. You're there 4 years, obviously. You start as a forward?
My whole life, I was actually a forward. I was recruited at George Mason as a forward. My freshman year, I played as a forward/outside mid. Then that freshman year spring, we only had 3 defenders, and they were like, you know what, Hugh, why don't you give it a shot? And so I was like, all right, and happened to do well that spring, and they kind of stuck me in the center back/defensive mid role from there my sophomore year, and then after my senior year, I was a lock-in center back ever since.
Okay. Not the easiest transition, obviously, because it's something that you know your whole life that you just attack, and then to make that drastic change to that's pretty much the last thing on your mind.
Right.
I'm sure is a little difficult, but it paid off. 2013 was at the time at least GMU's best season in the history of the college, and then obviously Richmond picks you up from there. Did you know you had something special that senior year at George Mason, or was it one of those things where you just kind of put in your shift and then Richmond came knocking and you took an opportunity?
Well, my senior year at George Mason, we actually had 8 or 9 seniors, so I knew from there just having, and all 8 of us actually lived together in the same house, so it was basically like a group of brothers. So I knew from that standpoint that we would have a pretty good year regardless of what the coach was, the coaching standpoints and the tactics, because we were pretty much brothers on the field and we worked hard for each other. So we knew we could do big things, but not as good as what we did our senior year. But I'm very glad that happened for us because we needed that. And then from there, nothing was set in stone. I was on the draft board, top 100, but kind of had an idea I wasn't going to get drafted, so nothing was really set in stone. And that's why in 2014, I bounced around to multiple different USL teams, trying out here and there, and then Richmond came, and I was able to find a home.
Yeah, and you were obviously in PDL before that,
right.
Which especially now, and with the growth of both leagues, even we've seen that relationship really grow. But at the time it was like the USL Pro division, even. So when Richmond comes calling in 2014, which is almost like the dark ages of USL at this point, given what the league is, right? Yep. Like Is it one of those things where you went, all right, who are these guys? Or is it one of those things where, being from Maryland and things like that, you knew kind of what Richmond was about? Or if it was one of those things where they just went, hey, we play pro soccer, and you're like, great, I'm there.
Well, I knew of Richmond Kickers a little bit because being from George Mason in Northern Virginia, Richmond's only an hour and a half, so we used to play against each other almost every spring season. And I
Okay.
actually had a friend at the time on the team as well, so I knew of them. I just didn't know how strong the league was. When you're in college, you really, especially at that time, your focus mainly is on the MLS. But now here, 4 years later, one of the big things is USL.
Yep.
So to come from where I was and kind of being at a stepping stone and working our way up as a league into how we are now, it's been awesome to see this league progress. But yeah, from my standpoint, coming out of college, my first year, I knew it was a professional team. I just didn't know how strong the league was, but I knew it would be a great opportunity, and I knew it would be a good stepping stone for me to continue my dreams to becoming to the MLS one day.
Right. And then, for all the talk about Lily Ball and things like that, there's a reason that he's still around. Is that a system that you've always kind of admired, or is it one of those things where now that you're in it, you really appreciate what it is?
I've always pretty much admired it. So from my experiences coming from Richmond, Lee Calishaw, he's a very intense coach, but pressure makes diamonds, that kind of thing. He's kind of a perfectionist. So coming in my rookie year, the speed of the game was completely different from college. And you think you're ready, but you're really not. And so I was very, very fortunate to find a home. And I'm very glad I was there for my 3 years and was able to progress and learn his system and things like that. Transitioning to Bethlehem, I'm very, very glad that I had that experience because growing up, I always wanted to be a part of an MLS, club/academy system and just to see how that aspect works. So just to be around MLS guys like CJ Sapong, Bedoya, and those kind of guys, to seeing Matt Real, Mark McKenzie now on the first team, that kind of thing, being with them and traveling with them and just hanging out with them, meeting Ernie Stewart and Jim Curtin and all those guys, to be around that was definitely a great experience for me, and I'm very glad I was a part of that. And so for Bob, I actually went to open tryouts for Bob back in 2014. Things didn't work out, and that's kind of what led me to Richmond. But we've always been cordial. I made sure I went up to him after. I think my first or second start ever in 2014, my rookie year, was against Rochester in Rochester, and we won that game. Had a really good game, and Bob came up to me, and we were cordial. He said, "Great game," and so I made sure every single year I shook his hand, said, "What's up, coach?" and those kind of things. And he's always, since I've been in the league, he's always been top 5, top 3 defensive teams in the country, in the whole league. Sorry. And so, you hear about those things, but you don't really actually believe until you're actually here in this club. And now, since the preseason day one, it's been intense, it's been sharp, it's been, lily ball, as you said, but now I can see it for myself, and I'm actually very impressed, and I'm very fortunate to be here in this organization. So I'm looking forward to it because he's a defensive-minded coach for the most part, and it's definitely going to help us and help me defensively to help broaden my game.
For sure. Yeah, it's one of those things where, for all the talk about it, and especially the word that gets thrown around a lot, like almost to the point where it's comical, is organization. It's one of those things where it's, they're organized and they're organized. And, in a way, it almost feels like people are saying that because they don't want to say boring, you know what I mean? And not even in like a bad sense, but just, he's very much, we don't need to score 6 times or like you guys did the other day 4 times.
Right.
If the other team can't score, and it's one of those things where I do always wonder, especially for, obviously you played in Lee Calshaw's system where it's not the same, obviously, but it's a similar mindset where you don't have to score a bunch of goals. Right. And then you move to, the Union where that's a very it's possession based, but it's attacking possession based. And now you're back in the kind of a defensive set. So, is that one of those things that you kind of really, that stands out for USL when people go, what is USL all about? Is it kind of that clash of styles and clash of coach philosophies, and even for the teams to have different mindsets where, you have your MLS2 sides that are more developmental, or your, your standalones that, want to just outright win the cup and things like that. And obviously since he's in now, and that throws a whole wrench in the thing, and Nashville's going to be in MLS in the next 2 years or something. So that's, Is that something that you've always kind of, or especially in, the last 2 or 3 years, as a guy that was here when it wasn't as big as it is, has that been really interesting for you just to see that kind of clash come in?
Yeah, it's been very, very interesting to see this whole dynamic of this league continuously grow. Like with Atlanta United being here as well, Bethlehem Steel just joining. So when I first came into the league, one of the few young teams was New York Red Bulls 2. I
Yeah,
think that was the only one at the time. So
sounds right.
when we went there and we traveled them every year, we knew how good they were. We knew they'd send down first team guys when I was back in Richmond. We knew they were younger players, but we knew they'd always score goals. So it was always pretty intense. But to see those young boys develop from the New York Red Bulls 2 USL team to now on the first team getting minutes and things is definitely a great development. But as you were saying, in terms of other teams in the league, that's what kind of makes the USL. Every single team, for the most part, has their own style. When you look at Louisville, they may not be the most athletic team in general, but they stick by their system, possession oriented. They know what they're doing. Every single person's on the same page, and they tiki-taka move the ball. And you look at Cincinnati, they have great players. They have some more money, so they're able to buy some more players. But, talent isn't the hear-all, say-all kind of thing, but they definitely have cohesiveness and those kind of things. So that boosts well. But then you look at the older clubs like Richmond and Charleston, Rochester as well when they're in the league. Like, they stick to the same principles and organization tactics every single time, and they get the job done every single time. So they probably won't ever steer away from that for years to come, and that's okay because they have that success. But besides this past year for Richmond, we made the playoffs for the past 15 years in a row, and you stick by that every single time for the most part because it works and it gets the job done. That's what makes the USL. You go to different teams. For example, we play Ottawa this weekend. We know they have a bunch of veteran guys on the team, and we know it's not going to be an easy task no matter how unsuccessful they might have started the season. And it doesn't really matter because the USL, especially on the east side, it's a very, very tough and slope, and everyone's competing from top to bottom. So, yeah, it's a very intense league, and I love it.
Always a packed playoff race in the East.
Yeah.
Always. There's, maybe 2 or 3 teams every year that are out of it, but even then, that's not until March. So it's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Hugh, I forgot to say in the intro when I was gassing you up a little bit that you're also now a fellow podcaster.
Yes, I am.
So, like, this is gonna sound terrible. When did that start? Like, what was the creative spark that drove you to do that? Like, what, for those who don't know, sorry, I should backtrack a little bit. You just put out your first episode with Toby and Kay.
Right.
Your team, and it's just so funny because, like, you can tell when guys have a bunch of chemistry when they're talking to each other. And, like, I know it was literally you guys just, like, hung out in your living room or whatever, but it felt like you guys were just hanging out in your living room, and it was awesome. So, like, feel free to shamelessly plug yourself and just kind of talk about, like, how that started and, like, what you're doing with it.
Yeah, so basically about almost a year ago, and I was just watching ESPN one day. I watch ESPN almost every day, and I see all these sports analysts talk about all kind of sports and Little League baseball and all these things. It's just awesome. Don't get me wrong. It's great. But you really, besides Champions League and some big-time clubs, is the only time you ever see soccer highlights in general. So I was thinking to myself, I've been in the league at that time 4 years, and I've developed a little bit of a platform. Now here I am in my 5th year. Why not continuously broadcast this game of soccer and use my platform to help, build a connection between people in general so they get an idea of what's really going on in the soccer world and the soccer aspect about the grind. And then for us being in the USL, we're not the top league either, so it's definitely a great perspective to hear from developing players who are trying to reach their ultimate goal, reaching to the top. So I'm very fortunate enough to be here in my 5th year. 3 different teams, built some great connections, many players across this whole Eastern Conference. So I'm very looking forward to sharing all these experiences and these stories and these journeys and all these topics and latest games and those kind of things to share that with you guys, and not just Pittsburgh fans, for all fans and players across the USL and across the country, just so people can hear and express themselves, and the young players as well who are looking to become professionals one day, they can hear from our experiences as well so they can continue their journeys.
For sure.
That's kind
of what's the Twitter on all that stuff? Where can people find you on that stuff, and where can people find you in general? And then I'll leave you alone, really.
So yeah, follow me on BackYardFooty. That's one word, BackYard Footy, FOOTY on Twitter. I'm also on SoundCloud as well, the same hashtag BackYardFooty, and YouTube, so you guys can follow along. And I'm on Instagram, at Backyard Footy, but it's 2 Ys. But definitely check in on all those social media accounts because I'm going to be showing live videos when I have more teammates come through and different players, just so people can actually join along and things like that. And follow along on Twitter as well, so you can stay updated on when new players are coming into town and those kind of things. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to sharing these experiences throughout this whole year.